the Ames Conference Board for Tuesday, February 23rd to order. Welcome. And first item of business is our roll call.
Ames City Council.
Here.
Story County Board of Supervisors.
Here.
Ames Community School District.
Here.
Gilbert Community School District. Nevada Community School District.
Present.
And United Community School District.
Here.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion approving the minutes of January 26, 2021.
So moved.
Moved by Eden. I'm sorry, who was that? Moved. I'm sorry. Eden, thank you. And who seconded?
Second, Betcher.
Betcher, thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right, moving on to item number 3, public hearing and proposed 2021-2022 budget for City Assessors Office. Brenda, do you have anything that you wish to bring to the conference board's attention before we open the public hearing?
The only thing I will say is I hope that you all got the corrections to pages 3 and 4 of the report.
Okay. All right, declare the public hearing on the proposed 2021-22 budget for the City Assessor's Office to be open. Is there anybody, Brian, who is indicating interest in addressing the conference board with respect to the budget?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Thank you. We'll declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion adopting the budget.
So moved.
Corey, thank you.
Second. Merkin.
Thank you. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, we'll go ahead and do roll call.
City Council.
Aye.
Aye.
Story County Board of Supervisors.
Aye. Aye.
And the community school districts.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Move on to conference board comments. Gloria, anything tonight?
Nothing tonight.
Sabrina?
Nothing from me.
Thank you for coming. Latifa?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Yes, you'll recall that I made a motion at our last meeting to put the topics of the mini board structure and a process for evaluating the permanent assessor's performance on the agenda for tonight's meeting. But I think the background material that we need in order to process that is not ready yet. So without making another motion, I just understand that we will process that at a future time when appropriate. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks, David. And yes, since we're going to have some special meetings coming up anyway to consider appointing a city assessor in the near future, hopefully, we'll ask that be on the agenda also. Thank you. Lisa.
The only thing I wanted to say is thanks for the consideration on regarding the payroll portion that the county has had, that the city is looking to have us both transition as of January of 2022.
Joe.
No comments, Mayor.
Linda.
Nothing. Thank you.
Amber.
I'll just give this group a quick update on the assessor search process. So the examining board met briefly and nominated the chair position, which I am filling. And I've been working with the city manager's office and our human resources department to put together some materials that will be or are being distributed to those who are certified across the state to apply for the position. The assessor's job will be posted on the city's website. We'll be accepting applications through about mid-March. And then the examining board will be meeting with the assistance of our human resources department and the city manager's office to conduct phone interviews and then narrow that down to a group of finalists with the goal of coming back to this board with a recommendation around mid-April.
Any questions for Amber on the process? Thanks, Amber. Tim.
Thank you, Amber. Nothing else.
Bronwyn.
Yeah, ditto. Thanks to everyone serving too, and nothing for me. Thanks.
Thanks. Jennifer?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming. I just want to express my appreciation to several of the board members who forwarded some recommended names for the board of review. We have one that definitely committed to and has already submitted their application. There's another one that I was able to talk to on multiple occasions who actually submitted for a different city board or commission, and I believe that he will also be applying, and we would be done at this point in time, but for the resignation that was unexpected a few weeks ago that I shared with you. So we still have requests out to at least 3 or 4 more individuals. So we're going to try and actively recruit the third one, have a full board for the assessor before the end of next month. So we may have to have a special meeting, a very short meeting called to approve these appointees so that we can get them in place and they can go through some training and get prepped for their duties probably in April and May. But it's been a lot of work. Appreciate Brenda's help. Brenda, thank you very much for providing backup materials and others on our city staff that really worked to try and help out, and you're submitting those names. So anyway, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Edens, thank you. All right, we are adjourned. Everybody, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully in the very near future with some candidates to consider. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Night.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for February 23rd, 2021. I call the meeting to order. And once again, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, this council meeting continues to be conducted as an electronic meeting. And if you're interested in participating, you may find information on the city's website under the City Council meetings. You go on to the agenda, you can find the link for the Zoom meeting. There's also a toll-free number you can call in, and we are broadcasting on YouTube, Ames Channel 12, our cityofames.org/Channel 12, and also on Mediacom Channel 12. Council, we are working from an amended agenda this evening. The first is there was an additional item added, which is resolution. This is added to the consent agenda. And that's resolution awarding a 5-year enterprise agreement to Carrier Access IT LC of Clive, Iowa for Cisco security software for information technology division in the amount of $166,010.80 to be paid annually in a sum of $33,202.16. And additionally, the staff had pulled item 42, which is to be a closed session, they are not in a position at this time to present materials to council. So with that, move on to consent. Is there anybody who wants to pull any item from consent this evening? Hearing none, entertain a motion approving consent with the additional item.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Garten, seconded by Corriere. Roll call, please.
Fletcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk, Corriere,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Judy Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to public forum. This is a time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. Brian, is there anybody, actually before we go into that, Brian, why don't you share how people can access or be recognized either under public forum or public input on the items that will be on the agenda tonight?
Certainly. Anybody who wishes to speak on this or any other item during the meeting can indicate their interest by pressing the raise hand button located at the bottom of their screen if they're joining us by video. If they're joining us by phone, they can press *9 and we will get the same indication that they've raised their hand. And Mayor, I see Merlin Fancook has a hand raised. Merlin, you can unmute yourself, state your name and address, and begin your comments.
I'm Merlin Fonkook, 1424 Kellogg Avenue. It was a year ago that you blessed our neighborhood with sidewalks at the February 25th meeting, so it seems to be a good time to review that. Our neighborhood really would like to get the snow removal issue resolved this winter so we don't go into another winter facing this. You created a problem for us with snow removal on the sidewalks that are right along the street. In fact, yesterday there was a younger gentleman, I might have been a young grandpa or an older father that was walking, coming down the sidewalk east on Kellogg, east on 15th, coming by the McLean's, who moved from the sidewalk to the middle of the street because the middle of the street was a lot better to walk a baby carriage on than the sidewalk, which had ice on it. Today it's warmed up enough, and Brad said he's worked on it some, that we've gotten rid of most of the ice. But it's impossible to keep the sidewalk clear if you come and do a second pass with the plow and throw stuff over it, because we don't know when it's going to happen, and we shouldn't have to do that to start with. So we'd really appreciate trying to get this resolved this winter so we can go into next winter knowing what's what. My other thing I want to talk about is the consent agenda. When Gloria pulled that off the consent agenda a year ago, she said something like, Merlin, we're not being unfair. This is just what we do when we pull something from the consent agenda. Well, I thought about that a lot, and I recalled an instance in the past, and I don't think that's how the consent agenda has been looked at historically. It was 15 to 25 years ago, I don't know when. It was when John Klaus was still the city attorney. The agenda was under discussion for some reason at a meeting, and I remember John saying how the agenda was made was kind of a mysterious, I think he said process, I can't remember the exact word. And then we talked about the consent agenda, or the council did, and the consensus was that the consent agenda was for items that were considered non-controversial. But there seem to be no written rules about how you operate at a meeting. So I would like to suggest that you adopt a written rule that the consent agenda, and that's if the council wants to do something different from what staff recommends, that the action on it must be delayed until the next regular council meeting. That's what Councilmember Garden motioned for last year. but there was no second. There was no reason you could not have waited. The reasons that were given, I don't have time to detail, were essentially bogus. You know, our neighbors, at least me, may not be so mad at you if we felt like we were even given a chance for this, but we weren't. Democracy is supposed to give us a chance. It's supposed to give us notice and an opportunity to be heard. You folks acted just like the Republicans in the Iowa legislature. Please adopt my recommendation for the consent agenda. I think that is a fair way to operate, and I don't think we were treated fairly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Thank you, Brian. We'll close public forum and we'll move on to item number 30, under administration, discussion of additional questions for residential satisfaction survey. Susan?
Good evening. Every February, I try to come before the council just to give them a heads up about the upcoming resident satisfaction survey. This year is no different. Just to refresh you on the timeline. Typically, we send the resident satisfaction survey out in April to 1,250 randomly selected utility bill customers. They are usually due back in May, and by July, we have gotten the frequencies on them and the report. We work with Iowa State to develop the report, which is usually done by September, and I'm back before you in October with the results. And prior to that process starting, I like to just meet with you briefly to talk about any potential questions that you might have, or more accurately, topics for questions you might be interested in exploring. And so with that, I will open it to your comments.
Council?
Susan, I had one question about a question, and for some reason I've never thought about this before, but we have under the section where you ask for these respondents to tell us about themselves, we have those questions like what's your age, what's your gender, etc. And one of the questions is, are you of Hispanic or Latino origin? And we simply have yes or no. We do not have prefer not to answer, which is an option for the race question. So is that possible to be added there, or is there a reason not to add it?
So when we added the demographic questions years ago, we were, I think, following census data. So our data would be in alignment with national data. But I don't know that that's an issue. So I will just simply talk with Nora Lajahazen, who's worked with us for years, and just ask her about it. I think it's a good suggestion. I'll ask her if there's some reason why they do it that way.
Thank you.
Other questions? Or questions on questions, or thoughts on questions? Susan?
They seem fine. I mean, yeah, they look good to me.
Okay. All right.
So my sense is that we would then leave the survey as is.
All right, I entertain a motion. Let's give her some direction.
I would move that we move forward with this survey as presented.
Second.
Moved by Brownman and seconded by Martin. Gloria?
I do have one amendment that I suggested, so it's not as printed. Would you take that as a friendly amendment to your motion?
Yeah, I would say, oh yeah, sounds good. I would accept that friendly amendment to add an option for prefer not to answer. Was that what you said, Gloria, on the?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, do you agree with that, David?
And yes, and that's understood to be in consultation with the survey expert. If that works out okay, then great.
Okay. All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 31. Deb.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here to talk about the community action planning process. And so you have a couple of documents before you. City staff has been working on drafts of the appointment application and the charge for the community input committee, and this is for your review. This is the body that will be supplementing the community-wide input and feedback process for the community action plan. And as stated in our RFP, we've placed importance with having a robust, multifaceted, inclusive community input process. The consultants responding with their proposals to the RFP were tasked with outlining their plans for community engagement, especially engaging those groups who do not traditionally participate in our local government input processes. As stated in previous council meetings, the mayor and council will serve as the steering committee for this project. So in this capacity, you all will provide direction and guidance on key decision points, advise the consultants on interim proposals and policy considerations, and make the final decisions related to the consultants' recommendations. Obtaining community input and feedback will be done at designated points throughout the climate action planning process, and we will enlist the assistance of the consultants in working with the steering committee in determining those designated times. So I know there are questions and proposed modifications to these documents, so I don't want to take a lot of time in describing what's in the application. So I'll turn it over to council at this time for any questions and comments you have on those documents.
Yeah, before we go any farther, I just want to, I think that there's been council's gotten some emails, and I think there's a little bit of potentially lack of clarity on the role, and partly I think it's due to, and this is for council to give you direction, but maybe it's partly the use of the word task force and also some of the text, in what was included. And I think council understands this was just a first pass. This was not like, hey, let's just go ahead and, are you okay with it? Let's just rock and roll with this. And I think that maybe you could just share again what the role and function is, what the purpose is tonight, and also I think there were some people who saw that something came up on the city website about applying. Can you kind of talk about that for a second too? Just so everyone who is maybe watching or listening is clear, and I think you did a good job articulating the fact of what council's role is, and it's much like the Ames 2040 plan as well too. So if you wouldn't mind just expounding upon that, maybe it's repeating a few things, but I think it's worth making sure everyone understands what the roles are and responsibilities.
Sure. So, so the task force, or whatever name you choose to call this body, is really they'll be supplementing the citywide or community-wide input process. And so this group is broken out into different community sector groups, and so that we can have the representation that we believe is needed to provide feedback and input on the various parts of the climate action plan and the goal development. So we want input from the business community, we want input from residents, we want input from schools, and we want the input from those individuals who just normally don't participate in our processes. So those are the 10 community sectors that we listed out on that application. And again, it's not a decision-making body. They won't be asked to vote on any recommendations. They won't be asked to provide recommendations, or asked to provide input and feedback on those decision points that the steering committee has first discussed, and then turns over to the consultants and to staff to talk with the task force or the community groups on what their feedback would be those particular points. And we will work with the consultants on determining when those feedback points are necessary to occur, and on what specific topics we're needing that feedback. So that's the role, and I understand the confusion, and I know we'll be finessing and making changes to the charge so it truly reflects the intentions of council and our intentions of involving the community group within the process. So we'll definitely discuss that. I'm trying to think what your other question was. Oh, the website. So we want this application to be completed. One of the ways to complete it electronically. So yesterday we did post it temporarily on the website, so internally staff could test it to make sure that the blanks could be filled in, and then when it was submitted, it was going to the appropriate people. And then we took that down. We took it down this morning. We thought it was brought down last night, and then Council Member Martin kindly pointed out that it was still out there, so it was taken down this morning. But it was just for testing purposes. We probably should have put something to that effect on it in case people did see it. But no one submitted an application. But it did work successfully with the internal testing we did.
So make sure people who think that, oh my gosh, it's already taken off, what's going on? It's not like it was we got the applications and we're done. It's just basically a beta testing that the staff is trying to do.
Yep.
Right.
Sorry for any confusion.
Okay. Open up the floor for council questions, comments, input.
Yeah, it might be helpful too. You've done a nice job of laying out the role of the task force, but could you give us a couple of thoughts as far as the junctures at which the public would have opportunity to have input?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how the structure is laid out in the document would be there would be the community group, and then there could be additional input solicited through the members on that community input through their contacts or through any other groups that they're associated with. So that was kind of how we envisioned that we would get a more robust input and feedback process through those community group members. We understand that could get a little clunky and it may not achieve what it is we're setting out to achieve. And so we're also looking at offering an online survey, making that available through other means, on paper, mailing, that kind of thing. We're looking at some interactive website types of options, depending on the consultant. Again, making sure that we're reaching people who may not have access to the internet, and how we can solicit their input. So those are just some of the ways that we're talking about and thinking about, and hopefully as the months roll along, we'll be able to have some in-person type events as well. But that will remain to be determined based on how the pandemic continues and what kinds of restrictions are out there that we need to follow. Does that help?
I think the other thing too is that historically it seems like, from what I understand from staff, is that there are certain groups of people you identify who they may be that may not respond, and that this is really an important tool that's going to be developed, the plan. And you kind of comment on why we got these different groups together. Have we historically had good feedback from them or not good feedback from them? Because it's not like trying to say it's only these people. It's just we're trying to make sure that we're hitting these groups. Is that correct? Or
that is correct. There are intended efforts that will be put into place to do outreach and make contacts with people to make sure that representation is there. And we understand that there are people out there who haven't participated in the past because of maybe size of the group or the fact that, they're responding to, or being expected to participate, with other people that they don't know or in a place that's unfamiliar. So we will try to make every effort possible to help people feel comfortable in participating and in that they are being heard. The thing about this is, people are on varying levels of understanding climate change and what a climate action plan is. There's education that needs to be done with this as well. And that's something that we're making sure the consultants understand. That people are coming in on this topic at varying levels. And some people may not really even be paying attention to this until they truly realize or understand that it could have an impact. It could have an impact on their transportation cost. It could have an impact on their utility bill. And so once it gets personalized that way, then people will start to say, okay, I need to understand this a little bit more and participate then at whatever level they're feeling comfortable with. So it is important that we make sure everyone understands the process, what's going on, and how to provide that input.
Thank you. Council, I believe that there's, based on some conversations that we've had prior to tonight, that it may be that if we keep this at a little bit higher level this evening, kind of give staff some direction in terms of what changes you're looking for versus actually parsing out the words or getting down to a specific nugget. And then I know it's on the agenda as a resolution approving, but I might just suggest tonight that maybe to have this as a conversation and then get this referred to staff, have them come back, maybe even when the consultant's on board, get their feedback so that there's adequate time to really get this clarified. But I understand from just some of the conversations that there's some really good feedback, some really good observations that each of you have. And so I just want to make sure that we don't get down too far into the weeds this evening based on what we're trying to accomplish. But with that said, Tim, do you have anything that you want to share to begin with?
Yeah, just to reinforce, I think that the council in my tenure has really upped its game in terms of community outreach. And you think of a project like Complete Streets, there was really a widespread effort to reach different parts of the community. And given the magnitude and significance, I assume this is going to be sort of a similar broad effort to reach out to the university, to a variety of different cross sections of the community. So again, I think John's points will take, and not for us to direct that stuff, but we just appreciate what you're doing. John, are you ready for any kind of suggestions or questions on the particulars of the list?
I think let's get some conversation going here, what your observations are, and some feedback, input, general thoughts on it before we get into the particulars. And if we need to do some motions, we can. If I sense that there's maybe I see some head noddings, yes, and some saying no or nothing, we may just go ahead and get some motions. But if it sense that the council is in agreement for giving staff direction, it's not a final document, but that's I think we just kind of feel our way a little bit tonight, Tim.
So I'm trying to get. I have a specific question as to Iowa State.
Go ahead.
So on the list of the people for the task force, we list Iowa State University Facilities Planning and Management, one representative. I would like to suggest that we reach out to President Winterstein directly to allow her to decide the kind of person that she would want to serve on the task force. And it may well be someone from planning and management, facilities planning and management, but it might be someone entirely different. And I guess I would like to give some discretion to Iowa State. We might think about as well, since we don't have any ability to govern what Iowa State does with respect to climate action planning. my hope is that what Iowa State does would be done in concert with what the city is doing. And so the council might have an interest in increasing the number of representatives from Iowa State, since they're half our population. But at the very least, I would like to sort of pull back and let President Winterstein decide who represents the university in that.
Okay. Council members have any objection to that? Okay. Deb? Anything else, Tim?
That's it, thanks.
All right. Others?
I have a couple questions. First, I like the sound of waiting a while to finalize this. The RFP for our consultant is heavy on the public outreach, and so I think we need to rely on their wisdom to help improve this process as well. So I like that idea. One question I had when I'm looking at the list of sectors, it says residential, 3 representatives. What does residential mean?
It's broad. So residents, anybody who's a resident who doesn't necessarily feel like they fit into any of the other community sectors,
Okay.
could be in that category. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, and another question, under community schools, is that intended for students or faculty, staff, or who possibly both? What's the thinking?
Possibly both.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me just mention some of my other suggestions here. I don't know. I can't decide yet whether this is something we should vote on or just talk about. So one thing that occurred to me was part of the charge of the task force that I think might be going a bit too far is there is a bullet that asks the task force to recommend greenhouse gas reduction targets. And I think that's maybe stretching a bit far beyond what I envision as the supplemental community input function of the task force. So I'd suggest that we think about removing that and leaving that sort of duty to the combination of consultants and the council based on the input that we received from our outreach mechanisms. So that's one of my thoughts. I think that it might help to consider renaming the group. Task force to me just sounds like it's a lot more, it brings strike force to mind, or something that's really going to be responsible for effecting change. And I understand it as being more of a community input thing. So I'd suggest something like, a supplemental input committee or something like that, but not wedded to the words, but I think renaming it might be helpful in communicating what the role is. Another thought that I have is that it's this kind of a multi-layer structure that's a little confusing. We have the task force members. I get that they are there to be excellent communicators, to ensure that interests that are sort of coherent, like maybe because you do home building, right? That's something that's different than other sorts of activities, that those interests are actually represented properly. So that role I understand, but then the subgroups that they might assemble of the developers, for example, in order to get together, to have an application process for that as well, I think it maybe is getting too complicated. And I wonder whether it would be enough just to focus on the task members and then encourage them to come up with appropriate structures to reach their communities, rather than having all go through mayor, nomination and council approval and that sort of thing. So that's just an idea. I'm curious what other people would think about that. So there, I've said a bunch of things. I don't know where to go from here.
just a point of clarification on your last comment, David. So those sector representatives, those wouldn't go through any formal process of appointment through the city. So the task force individuals would, and then anybody that they are assembling or reaching out to through their contacts or through their associations or whatever, they would be determining how they're doing that, who they're pulling in, how they're soliciting that input.
Great. So that makes sense to me, and I like that. The application forms didn't clearly communicate that to me. So maybe that's just a wording change that might make that clearer.
Okay.
Thanks.
So with that information, David, I wrote down 4 points that you mentioned. The multi-layer seems complex. Is Deb's explanation, if some clarity was achieved with that, would that take care of or address that particular item at this point in time?
I think it would, yeah. If we're not actually requiring application of, nomination, appointment, and all that for people other than the task force representatives, then, or whatever we end up calling it, then yeah, I think that solves it for me.
Why don't we just look at it? Maybe there's a way we can simplify the whole thing. Maybe it needs to be separate direction to the task force members, not necessarily on the application, which gets it confusing. Okay. Let us look at that whole thing. I think I know what you're saying, though, David.
Gloria?
I'd like to follow up on something that David said, which is regarding the bullet points on the charge. And I don't know whether this is kind of a question, Deb. The bullet points seem to require, at least at some level, some expertise in, I don't know, sustainability, climate change, something scientific. And yet we have a much broader sort of list that doesn't include scientists or people who might have that expertise. Am I reading that wrong? Or is there somewhat of a disconnect between the list and the bullet items?
So the thought behind that was we're not requiring any climate change expertise for the members who are interested in being on the task force. They could be learning as they're going along in their task force duties. However, what they could do then is get that input, get that expertise, get that scientific view from a sector representative or resource group / consultant. And then that information would be pushed up through the task force.
Isn't that the role of the consultant, though?
Part of it, yeah. Yeah, we're relying on that too. I think that's going to help us get a balance as far as what the consultant sees and then the input that's coming in through the task force.
I think that maybe when you're looking at simplifying this, the fact that the sector consultants and sector resource group representatives are mentioned on the application form, but from what I understand, you just said they are not actually part of the application process. So I think that's where some of the confusion arises, that they're outside of this process. I've been thinking about this as very similar to the way the Campus and Community Commission is supposed to operate, with representatives from different sectors, if you want to call it that, and they go out and talk to others and bring back information. And is that an accurate sort of reflection of the task force?
It's a good analogy. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that clarifies some things for me. I do think when it comes to the list of representatives, we can do some tinkering there, but I have problems with the category other, because I'm not going to claim to be other. So that's difficult if I'm someone who wants to be part of this process, because I'm naming myself as outside of this process. And so I would prefer if we could figure out a way to describe that category, and maybe just, you know, residents who historically have not participated in city policy issues, you know, just use that, because I think that is descriptive of the sort of people that we would like to engage in these discussions.
Does everyone on council agree with that? With that suggestion in terms of just okay, I'm sensing that that's correct. So I think without having further discussion being necessary, let's the challenge is, or not the challenge, but the request is to change that category description then essentially.
And then one other point, and that's just, I would love to see us making it obvious that we can have overlap here and encourage overlap between expertise and these categories, so that, you know, maybe the council would like to require that out of this entire group, we have, I don't know, 3 to 5 individuals who have some kind of higher level of experience with climate change, whether that's, you know, somebody who knows planning or sustainability or whatever. We do that with other commissions, and I think that that enriches discussion if you have a few people who are more attuned to it, along with all of those folks who may be newbies who just are very enthusiastic. And I think that might address some of the concerns that we've been hearing about where are the scientists, where are the students, where are all these. If we created those overlays that could allow somebody to be both and, you know, you can be a residential representative and a student. You can be a residential representative and a scientist. I don't know how we do that, but I would love to see us try, at least for some positions. I don't know that we want to add people to a 22-member committee. And so I sort of like that both and idea, and figuring out how we could do that. I don't know if anybody else does. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Council feedback on Gloria's last comment.
I guess I assume a little bit that some people with a background in climate issues would self-select. So if someone has no interest and no background, they're probably not going to sign up for this. Probably not. So I'm a little bit apprehensive about creating a requirement for the positions. I really like David's 2 suggestions on renaming this group. I think that's a very solid proposal. I don't have a name, but I think to do something different than task force, I think would be good. And I agree with him. The issue on selecting the target for greenhouse reduction seems like it doesn't fit with the others in terms of the level of lifting that we're asking this group to do. So I would also agree with removing that. It's a good suggestion.
Bronwyn, Amber, Rachel, what are your thoughts?
When I look at the list, there's a lot of different representatives from the community that certain areas have 3 or 2 representatives assigned, but the 2 from Iowa State, one for government of the student body and one for facilities planning and management, are the only ones that have 1 representative. And while I think there could be a very broad difference in, you know, the 3 individuals that are serving for residential or business, I think the same goes for people in the student body. They could have completely different experiences depending on where they're living, what their major is, maybe their background as to what they could bring to the table for part of this task force. They could be engaged with completely different parts of campus. And I think expanding both the Iowa State University student representatives and not necessarily just confining that to individuals that are involved in student government, I think that would be beneficial to increase a couple more representatives, and same with Tim's suggestion to increase the amount of representatives from Iowa State and not necessarily confine those to facilities planning and management either. I think with a task force of 22, maybe like 3 or 4 more members is not going to be that much more difficult. It'll just give us a little bit more perspective. And then if needed, if they're splitting these up into smaller focus group type meetings, that would be easier to facilitate too.
Thanks. Roman?
I tend to agree with Rachel, I guess. You know, we heard a lot of feedback about including more students. And while I agree that yes, your residential representative may end up being a student. I think unless we are, specifically making a place for it, I don't know that it's guaranteed that will happen, other than the student government representative, perhaps. So I'd be all right adding, 2 or 3 ISU students as representatives. Like Rachel said, I don't see the harm in that. I know that the committee's already large, but adding just 2 or 3 more, maybe, I think seems okay. I like. I think everyone else's suggestions were good too.
How about David just react to or respond to?
Yeah. The supplementary input committee, something like that, I think sounded good. Or I like that idea too. Or I think that seems fine. And then was there another one?
He bullet 3 on page 6 was one thing, and I would just suggest that as you're looking at that bullet, maybe bullet 3, 4, and 5 all seem to be more specific, based on my understanding of what the charge of this group is to be more to respond to direction being given, or to respond to questions, desired input, feedback from the community, and
right. And not a target number. Yeah, I think that was a good suggestion too. That.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go
ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
5, I think you're suggesting, yeah. That doesn't mean you might, through the process, ask them to get input on some of those issues.
Right. They're just not making a recommendation as a group on that.
Feedback on something that maybe the consultant is recommending to you before you make a final decision.
Amber.
So much of my comments were pretty similar to what David said. I think that my understanding of this particular committee was to serve as a conduit for communication and feedback between the public. And so, I'm supportive of removing the bullet point that says recommend greenhouse gas reductions. I would also be in support of either removing or revising the last 2, just because I think I think it's just asking a lot. So if the 4th bullet point is provide a list of best practices that have been proven successful in the various sectors, it might be to work to solicit input on best practices or something like that. I get a little nervous when we're asking people from the community who may or may not be knowledgeable in this area to then go out and either research or provide opinions, when I think that's something really that either the consultant staff or the council should be doing independently and then getting feedback. I'm fine with expanding the number of people or adding more people from the various sectors. I just think we're going to have to be careful about making sure that we're encouraging, we're trying to represent a broad cross-section of the community, and people who are naturally drawn to climate change issues and have a high interest in the subject are going to want to apply. And I want to make sure that we're not getting all the input from, this people who are just interested in one particular thing, or that the input is somehow skewed because we have only people who are very passionate about it or very interested in it who are serving on the committee.
That one of the conversations I had was just from prior experience, a committee of 22 to 24 to 26 really becomes unwieldy. And typically when you have a large committee, people say, well, I'm not going to go tonight because there's 23 other people are going to be there. Can you comment on, I know, we appreciate, I see Mary down there, appreciate her, participating, and Susan and you are going to be shouldering the responsibility for helping facilitate these. Can you comment on, if you subdivide this into 3 groups, and on one evening, each of you took, a third of the group to have like maybe 8 people. So I'm sure you've done a lot of this too. It can be that a few people could dominate, or people just sit there and listen. And I think the goal of the council is we want to hear as many voices. And since no one's really voting on anything, it's really recording people's feedback and input from different sectors. And it's not to micromanage, just kind of respond to that, or maybe Mary can jump in or Susan can jump in too, because you really want to make it, we don't want to overload stuff and have you go into 3 times the number of meetings. But what are your thoughts on that? Because we want to make sure that we get everyone's feedback.
I'll give my feedback, and then Mary and Susan can certainly jump in as well. I think it makes it more doable if we're breaking it down into those smaller groups, and then figuring out a way to be able to share that communication with the other groups, because you might have the faith-based organizations meeting, and they are really interested in, what are the students saying? So there'll be a matter of being able to share that communication, but with those being considered open meetings, I think we can easily do that through sharing of minutes, and if it's on Zoom, people can jump in and listen that way as well. I think it's a very good suggestion, and makes the task much more doable. Those are my comments.
Mary, we thank you for being here. We know you're a key component to this, and I know it's near and dear to your heart too. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
I appreciate that. It's always a pleasure to discuss these items with all of you. I would agree with what Deb mentioned about the smaller groups and ensuring we really have that good feedback. And, an important part of really designating different sectors in this application is really to ensure that we are getting sort of the heart and soul perspective from the people that are working in those sectors, that are managing within those sectors, that really understand sort of the challenges and obstacles and some of the things they would be being asked to do. And so I think that smaller group discussion really allows those pieces, to be pulled out, and to ensure that we are hearing that, and we are definitely considering that, as we're working with the consultants to put together pieces that then go to the steering committee.
Susan, any thoughts?
I think it's really helpful to hear the council's feedback on this, because I think that when we put it all together, we probably weren't as careful on the vocabulary as we could have been, in that we look at this group as bouncing the ideas off, and it needs to represent the community. That is key. This is a representative focus group. And so we need all the sectors and everybody speaking. And if it's breaking them into small groups to get that feedback, that's how we'll do it. So thank you for your input.
Other thoughts from council? Or Steve, you want to have some thoughts?
Getting back on the composition of the group, I think it's important to note that we're not going to have voting. So some people, as we leave this meeting, will say, we need 4 principals on this. Well, really, it's not the numbers, because we have 4 or 2. The richness of it is, do they represent a certain group that they'll be able to relate their perspective to you. So that's where I don't if people say we need more students represented because there's half the population, that doesn't move me. But what does move me is one student doesn't represent the perspective of other students. So I could argue there might be different perspectives that students live off campus or on campus. The GSB student doesn't represent all the other students. So you want to make sure you have enough people to represent the different perspectives. But I don't think it says we have to have 20 students on there or 20 doctors on there. You know what I mean? We're just trying to make sure all the different perspectives, and that might have to be broken down. So the students I'm supporting, because I don't believe one student represents the whole student body. But I think when we leave, people will say we don't have enough of our group on there. But it's not like there's 20 people and you're going to have a vote, so that you better make sure you have a certain level of representation to sway the day. You want to make sure you have a diverse perspective. That's the richness that we'll get in you making will help you in making your final decision. So keep that in mind, because I'm sure between now and whenever we come back with the final, there'll be more and more requests to add more people, more representatives by a certain group. Well, we're not going to vote, so it's not going to matter.
So how will the feedback received from this group or groups be brought back to council? Will that be in the form of minutes or reports, or how will that
come back with a whole revised plan based on this feedback? We'll also have the opportunity to have the consultant that's selected, so we'll be able to look at their game plan. Remember, we actually knew the status of the land use policy plan, or the project we were working on. Remember, we agreed where the different points of public participation or open meetings were. Well, in this case, maybe working with them, we'll know where those specific thresholds will be, where we need to get input to you as a steering committee. They'll help us lay out that whole game plan. So after we get them on board, talk about their game plan, then we'll revise the program. We'll also get their input on it, and we'll bring it back to you for approval. We can still move ahead with hiring the consultant. They're going to do a lot of reconnaissance work up front before we have to have this group in place. So even though we're going to move quickly to hire that group, well, we still have some time to finalize this particular part of the plan. And remember, whether you're a scientist or a citizen at large, if you're not selected to be on this focus group, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to give input to the council. It can't be only through that supplemental group. That's an extra group. It should not be considered to have any more impact on you than all the other mechanisms we're going to use to get input. So people from all different walks of life who are on this focus group will still have an opportunity to impact your decision. It's very important to take advantage of it.
So similar to the Ames 2040 plan process, where public input was received, the public input will be shared with the consultant, who will then kind of aggregate it and kind of make sure it's summarized so that there's the council is getting a feedback loop to allow for understanding. I think I heard you say about affecting the plan, but the point is the plan will be directed by council.
Yes.
So it's the feedback they'll be given, and they can comment on that, much like we've been doing with RDG and the 2030 plan.
And if you remember the last consultant on our land use policy plan, you asked them to add more touch points with the public. So you may tell the consultant, I think we need to have more stops along the way to get input before we were asked to make a decision as we build the plan. So it'll be put together between the consultant and you and our staff, but we'll bring back a final based on all this input, and with the consultant, we'll bring back a new plan for you. See if we've captured all your thoughts.
So Deb, would you want to summarize what you've heard to make sure all council's all in agreement, and then we can go ahead and make sure that we can add anything else at the end. Unless David, you have something else you want to hear? Or?
Yeah, can you tolerate another round of words from me?
Sure.
So I'd just like to circle around to the question of the bullet points in the discussion. I think I agree. Bullet points 4 and 5, they call for best practices sort of opinions. And that's conclusions. That requires expertise. I really think that what we're looking for is excellent communicators here who are conversant in their specialized topics, but we're only relying on them to really genuinely say how they see things. We're not relying on them to teach us what the right solutions are or for us to trust them as being the authority for how the industry or how solutions to climate change work.
What I was hearing from the mayor, maybe we drop those 3 bullets, but maybe we lay the game plan out. There'll be some direction from the steering committee to go to the focus groups for certain things, and that may be one of them. Because there'll be more than just these 3 or 4 bullets. You see what I'm saying? So maybe it's better right now to just drop them, and then we'll develop the game plan. You may be asking this group for that kind of information or other information.
All right.
More after we get the consultant on board is what I'm saying.
I like that. And 2 more quick points. I think one sector that's maybe meaningful is just the healthcare sector, the hospital and McFarland Clinic. I think they have unique needs for energy consumption and footprint. So we might consider reaching out to them too to make sure that they're not missed in this input gathering. And finally, when all is said and done, I think it would be wise for us to be willing to adjust the final committee on the basis of the list of people who actually apply for it, rather than sort of rigidly adhering to our numbers as to the goals that we're looking for. That's just an element of flexibility, and if we end up doing that, I don't want people to feel misled. So that's something to think about just the next time we talk about this.
Now, David, what do you mean by that adjustment? Do you mean the numbers?
Yeah, I mean the numbers. Yeah, specifically, like if we find that, we have 4 people that we think would be really great communicators in their sectors, but they don't fit in the 3 residential slots. Well, we could just have 4 instead. No, I think that kind of flexibility.
Yep.
A lot more workable, especially if you're subdividing it into smaller groups too. You're not just making a behemoth organization or committee. Yeah.
I've got one other thing that I guess goes back to something I said before, when I was mentioning that I thought the sector resource group representative and sector consultants don't really fit on the application form. I think that maybe those people belong on a separate form, that, they're expressing interest, but they are not willing to serve on the main committee, but they're happy to work behind the scenes as resource people for the committee itself. And so you probably do need to have an application in the sense that you're collecting a list of people with particular expertise that could be utilized by the sector representatives.
Okay. We'll have to talk about how we handle that. Put this on a separate form so it doesn't confuse people, or how we'll do it.
All right, Deb, you want to kind of summarize where you think what you heard from council? And council, I'm going to, look just to you. If you all are in agreement, just nod your head, thumbs up, whatever at the end. And if not, let's parse or tease out what's of issue, and that I think that'll give staff a good direction on where to head. So how's that sound, Deb?
Okay. So first, renaming the task force to help communicate its role a little bit better. So what I heard tonight to consider is supplemental input committee or supplemental input focus group, something along those lines. Under the sectors, asking President Winterstein to appoint an Iowa State University representative. And just for a point of clarification, do we want that to remain at 1 representative, knowing we're going to have some flexibility, or do you want to bump that number up? I think that was Tim that had first brought that up.
So maybe a question for Mary, and this sort of springs from a point that David made. I thought it was a very good one. I really like David's suggestion that we would reach out specifically to our healthcare sectors. Not that they would necessarily have to be on this group, but we would specifically reach out to them because of their energy needs. I think that's a very good idea. Similarly with Iowa State, they produce their own energy. But I'm interested though, and Mary, this question is for you. I don't know, is Iowa State doing any parallel climate action planning on their own? that would be of benefit for us to know about? Do you know whether there's something they're undergoing?
Yeah, so we actually put forward a strategic plan for sustainability and operations that was endorsed by the president this fall, that specifically notes carbon emission reductions and some of the strategy goals and strategies that we are putting forward. So I see that basically the things that Iowa State is doing are going to assist in this, the city in reaching goals and having the carbon emissions impact. But yeah, we're certainly looking at our own internal operations as to how we can be more effective and goal setting that we have. Does that answer your question, Tim?
Yeah, it sure does. Is that a document that can be sent out to us as council?
Yes, absolutely. It's on our website right now, but I will definitely I can send the link, which has a number of pieces with it, including the resolution that our student government had put forward, a resolution that Faculty Senate had put forward that supports the final document and goal setting that we put forward through that planning process. So I can absolutely make all of that available so you kind of have the whole picture.
I appreciate Iowa State's leadership. I mean, maybe they're out sort of in front of us, and so I think that would be great. So maybe John, in your visit with with President Winterstein, she may have opinions as far as the number of people. I mean, again, given the role of being someone who's going to be reaching out to the university community, but also we've got Mary to communicate what they're doing already, and with this report, maybe one would be enough. I'm flexible.
I thought where you were going with this, Tim, and I think it makes sense, and that is, in lieu of just saying it's just one, if Dr. Winterstein felt that, boy, she'd like to have, two people, be on there, that would be okay too. Just defer to her and find out, explain to what the role is, what we're trying to accomplish. Again, this is a feedback loop. This is not a prescriptive, we want you to come in and do half the work of the consultant. That's what the consultant is for. And the steering committee, the council as steering committee, is making all the decisions and giving direction to the consultant. And this is really primarily getting feedback and ideas, and makes sense with what Mary just shared. Maybe people that are knowledgeable of what the university is doing would help inform that as well too. So maybe Mary and I could reach out to Dr. Winterstein together and just do a quick, call or a Zoom call, whatever, explain, and then they can go from there. So,
thanks.
All right, Deb, keep on.
Okay. We're going to add Iowa State students, and we'll keep the student government of student body, but then we'll also add additional Iowa State students. For clarification, under community schools, those representatives could be students and or staff. And then we're going to replace the other category with residents who historically have not participated in city policy issues. So, and then add the healthcare, or reach out to the healthcare sector about their involvement. So that would be the community sectors.
Okay.
Okay. So the other layers of involvement, what we have on the group or in the document right now, the sector resource group representatives and the sector consultants, we can collect a list of those individuals and have that available then to the different community sector task force members. So we could separate that out from this process.
Separate it out, make it simpler application. Yep.
Yep. And then jumping to the task force charge, those bullets 3, 4, and 5, we would remove. Right. And allow the discussion between the steering committee and the consultant to drive when those particular topics come up and if
Right.
input and feedback are needed.
Correct.
That is what I have. Did I miss anything?
I think the only comment I would just offer, I think you did a good job, is just maybe a desire to try and simplify. It seems kind of a complex, somewhat complex, you know, and maybe just looking at wordsmithing and trying to make it more on point for what we're looking for. So I think the key too is we spent now an hour and almost an hour talking about this, and we want to make sure that people, when they read something online, they clearly understand what it is, and don't, because other communities have done the reverse, you know, where this task force is actually serves as a steering committee, and then they bring the whole report back to the council, and that has had mixed results. In some communities, they just go ahead and reject the whole task force recommendations, and you got to start all over again. And that seems to be a tremendous, you know, waste of time. In this case, it's actually the council, much like we've done with the Ames 2040 plan. I think it's gone extremely well in terms of getting, because the council is a policymaker, and they need to be making, you know, given direction so we can get something which is tangible and executable. You know, so anyway.
I might add that some of these groups, we're going to have a lot of people who want to participate, and others we might be short of interested people. So we may need the city council to suggest names or go out and try to recruit people, our friends listening out there to get people. We have some groups that don't normally participate, so they're not going to hear this message. They're hesitant to even get involved in any kind of body with the government. So we're going to have to be more proactive with some groups than others to get good representation on this group. Council could help us, and other people can help us encourage people to apply, I think.
Council, does that summarize what you believe we talked about, and in general agreement with what Deb summarized?
Just a timing question. Could you review with council, Steve or Deb, what is the best case scenario in terms of the timing of when all this would happen? Are we confident this could happen all in this calendar year, or is some of this going to spill over the next year?
Yeah, so our the contract award, so we're on schedule so far with selecting a consultant. So the plan is still to bring a contract award to council on March 23rd. And the project looking to start on March 30th, and project completion October 1st of 2022. So it's 18 months is what we're anticipating. The goal setting to the planning, all of that, 18 months. So putting this off another month, so to speak, it's all doable, and I think it is a good idea to involve the consultants and help them take a look at who we're looking at for the community group and get their input. They've done this in a variety of communities, so their input would be very valuable.
And Deb, would it be true that also it's going to take a little while to get the consultant on board, get them ramped up before maybe the first time you're going to get or want feedback? So it allows, I mean, I think it's good to have a running start on it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, you know, I envision that once we do have our committee together to do a larger kickoff with them, so they understand the consultant's role and at the points that they'll be pulled in. And so we'll get those plans laid out as soon as we have the consultant identified.
Nicole, I apologize. I saw your thumb raised, but I want to make sure that maybe you have something else you wanted to add in. I should have asked you for your feedback a little while ago. I apologize.
You're fine. The two things I was going to bring up, Gloria brought one up with the word other being really problematic, and that needs to go. And then Rachel brought up the other one of just having more Iowa State students, because one student doesn't represent how incredibly diverse the students at Iowa State are.
Right.
Good. Thank you.
For those who are watching who are concerned about the timeline, I do think it's a long process, but I think it's the nature of the complexity of such a widespread process. Mary, you're still in the process of making recommendations to us. I mean, if there are issues of things that we can be doing that are representing best practices that come to your attention, you're still going to be recommending to the city consider those. So it's not as if our efforts on climate are somehow on hold for 18 months. We're constantly on the search for things now to reduce our carbon footprint. So I just don't want people to get the impression that this is something that is not an issue for us. It's a 24/7 issue for our staff that is in the planning process.
Yeah, in fact, I think the council gave Mary a green light and actually asked her to kind of be brainstorming on what other things she could be doing to bring to the table, exercising her expertise. She's got a lot of programs going well. Rampage Rampage is one of them. What else can we be doing? It's a good point, Tim. It's like we're not going to wait until the start of 2023 or middle of 2023 to start something. Maybe there's some other things we can start doing that would be helpful. So I see your head going up and down, Mary, so I'm going to say you're in agreement, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you look around at city departments and there's an incredible amount of effort and, proactive components in place, being discussed, being evaluated. So yeah, I just think there's a great team effort around sustainability that's continually considered.
Thank you.
Mayor, are you looking for a motion?
If you're so inclined, that'd be fine.
Well, I mean, just to sort of.
Sure.
I would move that we direct staff to move forward with this input body per our conversations tonight.
Second.
Second by Betcher, thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, did have some I thought what we'll just do is, even though this is this in a way almost like a workshop tonight, and this is going to come back to council again, I'm going to just go ahead and open up a short period of time for any public input or comment on this particular topic with respect to what council has discussed and with respect to the response that Deb offered. So Brian, I'll open up public input. Is there anyone who wants to address council and would like to have those comments limited to 3 minutes or less?
Yes, Mayor. The first speaker is Lee Ann Wilson.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. Very interesting discussion, and this is a wonderful process you've got underway.
Leanne, could you give us your address, please, for the record, and then you can go proceed. Thank you.
I always forget. 5326 Springbrook Drive.
Thank you, Leanne.
So I just was wondering about the process, having put together committees and things for other things. People don't sort of come with one dimension, and I'm just wondering if a slightly different format where you say, we are looking for robust representation from, and then you have a long list. And then, please tell us which of these categories you might be able to contribute in, and then assemble from that. You could have many, many different things you want represented, and probably fewer people would end up covering all of those things. And you wouldn't get everybody's ire up by specifying 2 of those, 3 of these, and 4 of the other thing. It would just seem like it might be simpler.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you, Brian. We'll close public comment. And once again, for those who may be watching or on this Zoom call, this will not be the last opportunity to give input. Certainly, council invites emails if you want to offer additional input. We did get some emails yesterday and today. And again, if people are not on this particular input committee, we still want input through the whole process. It's going to be very important. We want to hear from everybody. It's just, this is more of a tactical in nature to try to make sure we are getting to groups, because sometimes you don't hear from everybody. So Deb, thank you so much. Mary, thank you for being here this evening. Appreciate your time. Susan, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 32, State Reinvestment District Incentive Pre-Application. Steve?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We've been engaged in a somewhat complex endeavor these past months because we're actually trying to accomplish two things. First, we're trying to create a partnership with a developer to develop the property along Lincoln Way on the north side between Grand and Kellogg. And we've been talking about this project for some time now, right? And our hope is that this project, when completed, will serve as a catalyst for the redevelopment of the area in accordance with your Lincoln Way corridor plan. If you remember, you adopted that. So this will be a catalyst project. But while we've been waiting to develop that partnership with the developer, we also became aware of a new opportunity. Dan Cohane and Brent Dreyer approached us, I think it was late October or November, about the kind of the reauthorization of the Reinvestment District program. And that allowed us to accomplish a second alternative task, and that was to help develop revenue, perhaps to offset the property tax burden on our citizens, to help build a new indoor aquatic center, which all of us know in a few years will actually be closing down as it makes way. Our municipal pool has to be closed down to make way for the new high school pool. And that was one of the, I think, the goals the council established for themselves, to come up with innovative financing methods for dealing with a new indoor aquatic center. So in a relatively short period of time, we had to do a number of things, and we had to hire actually 3 consultants, one to help us give estimates on a new indoor aquatic center located at the across the street from the DOT complex, where they're about to sell that property. We also needed a developer to help give us concepts and also projections on costs for our downtown plaza, which the council identified a location just immediately east of City Hall on the parking lot that exists. And finally, as part of the application process for that state program, we had to hire a consulting firm who would give economic projections that are required as part of the application to the state program. An outside party has to give independent projections to the state in our application. So many of you are aware, I'm giving some of this information to help clarify for the citizens too about the Iowa Reinvestment District program. It's a very competitive program. The state has actually allocated, set aside $100 million that they're willing to give out as an incentive for projects that they approve. It's a very competitive process. I've laid out on page 1 of my report the points, 100 points that are needed for a variety of different topics, including uniqueness of the project, economic impact, project feasibility, the capital investment, funding leverage, non-retail focus, and also additional factors such as readiness for development, geography, diversity, the geographic diversity, and also funding needed. Now, what I want to make clear is the incentive here, we're going to talk about analyzing projects within this district that generate sales tax and hotel motel tax that will be over a 20-year period, will be inserted or transmitted to the city to help pay for certain projects. I want you to understand the money from the sales tax and the hotel tax money does not come from the portion that we receive. So we receive 1% sales tax, as you know, that helps finance property tax reduction and community development projects. It supports the arts and our human service agencies. That's not in jeopardy. What the state is doing is foregoing their share of the hotel motel tax and sales tax they will receive for projects within a designated district area. And it's with that money that we apply to help accomplish some projects. Now, interesting enough, normally if you look at most of the projects that are applied for, they're taking that incentive that's generated by this district revenue and they're plowing it back into the development. Actually, what we're trying to do is take advantage of that development and take those funds, that incentive from the state, and help us finance an indoor aquatic center, a city project. We're not giving that money to the developer in this case. So what I tried to show you, I don't have the application done. I'll send that out as soon as it's done. We are scrambling literally to get this done by tomorrow so we can submit it on Thursday to the city. What you need to know is the district itself cannot be larger than 75 acres. So we have a map at attachment 1. You'll see our proposed reinvestment district. And what we have to do is identify projects this time. If we can identify them this time that we know are going to happen, we can start analyzing the projected hotel or sales tax revenue, and that can be then given back to us in form of incentive. Okay. So what we know of, we're applying, you'll see in the application, 5 different projects. I don't have to go over these in any detail, at least the first 2. The Indoor Aquatic Center, you've seen that. We have some renderings for you. For the public, they need to know we basically used all the amenities we were going to put in the Healthy Life Center for the Indoor Aquatic Center. The council decided to go with the 2nd floor with not only aquatics, but the walking track and a multi-purpose room. So the estimated cost of that is $27.4 million. Remember that number? And you have all those, the breakdown of the costs there, or at least the capital costs are there. The downtown plaza, you're aware of, we hired a consultant on that. We've been working, and I think we showed you that at a prior meeting also. The final estimate of that is $4.2 million. Remember in the CIP, we do have $2.7 million. We have another $1 million available from the excess general fund revenue. Remember that we have left over. So we have in hand now, if you wanted to, 3.7 out of the 4.2. We have to do some more work with the consultant when they actually move from concept phasing to developing the design elements or specifications, and we'll see if we can reduce that number of 4.2 closer to our budgeted amount. If not, we might have to come back to you and get additional funds to finance it. But I think they're pretty conservative in there. They have very large contingency built in a number of areas. So we're hopeful we can move that number down. We do know that there's a project at the corner of 5th and Burnett, a project that's being redeveloped by the Nelson family, a pretty exciting project where they've already received our facade grants and awarded a state challenge grant. They're actually going to renovate the 1st floor for retail space and have some housing on a 2nd floor. That's going on now, so we can take advantage of that and identify that as a project. None of the incentive is going to that project. None of the incentive is going to the Plaza project, okay? I want you to understand that. All of the incentive is going to go to, as we're projecting it now, to our Indoor Aquatic Center. So the 4th project is the Lincoln Way Mixed Use Building. Now, we've only really had one in-depth discussion with the developer, and it's not their fault. Remember, their major focus is coming up with a viable project that will serve the needs for them and also be part of our catalyst project for the corridor study, the Lincoln Way corridor study. So we've laid out kind of the features of what we see in that. A hotel with 136 rooms. We have a conference space which has about 20,000 square feet, which will house big conferences and also sit-down dinners. A hotel, as I said, with a restaurant. 2 other restaurants are located in this big complex. Another retail restaurant space of about 14,000. Only 72 dwelling units. Principally, they're 1 bedrooms. You're not going to see 5 or 4 bedrooms. They're 1 or 2 bedrooms. About 84,000 square feet of office space. So this is a little bit different than you saw before, which was predominantly a residential complex. This is more of an office complex. And then key element, probably in need of about 600 parking spaces. So we have a lot of discussions yet to be had in terms of what the developer will pay for, what the city will provide in the way of incentives. But we have to fill in the blanks now with the application. So we're submitting the elements I told you about above, and this independent consulting firm has a very complex analysis where they project the sales tax and also the hotel returns based on their formulas that have been approved in the past by the state for this program. The other project is a Kellogg Hotel. That's another hotel. This is a different developer. different owner. We do have a letter from them that they're interested in building a hotel. Quite frankly, I don't think they'll have this. We'll have a developers agreement with them in the next couple of months. So we are including it as part of the calculation of the incentive. We're probably showing it not occurring for 5 years after the first hotel is open. So we probably won't get a whole 20 years of revenue from them. I guess the financial projections are what you need to look at on page 5, the first table. If you can look at that table, you'll see that we're projecting the aquatic center, the 2-story aquatic center. Remember, that's going to have a 6-lane lap pool, have 2 slides, a 0-depth pool for kids, a walking area, water walking area, a warm water, a therapeutic pool, and I think I got it all. That's estimated to cost in 2022 or $23 about $27,500,000. We do have $2 million from a bequest to the city of Ames. And the one before that, Brian. You go one more up. Page 5. You have $2 million you could direct to that purpose to help reduce the construction costs. Dan Cohane has stepped up and said he would lead the campaign to help raise donations to help lower the cost of the capital cost. We've laid a goal for Dan of at least $8 million, and he's done a wonderful job. I think he has a commitment now of $3 million, and he knows he's got his marching orders. We're going to need another $5 million before we can finalize the whole arrangement with the state and the developer and move ahead with any swimming pool. If you subtract out that $10 million from donations and bequest, the actual amount that we would have to pay for the swimming pool now is projected at the $17,494,000. The way this works, the city would have to issue the bonds, general corporate purpose bonds, and we will have to make the decision under what strategy you use to issue those later on. But once they're issued, they're the full obligation of the city. And then we hope then to mitigate the principal and interest burden on the taxpayer through the receipt of these reinvestment district funds. So if you look to the next page, the next table, I've tried to give you 3 columns. If you look to the left, it's the second to left column. It assumes the consultants' current estimates for the reinvestment revenue, what they're projecting. You'll see I start out with the $17 million. Understand when you issue $17 million, that's the principal payment. There's principal and interest payments and also carrying costs, because the first 2 years, those hotels and restaurants and everything probably won't be generating maximum revenue. It takes time to build those on and catch on. So we have to borrow from ourselves because we'll have to make the principal and interest payment, even though the revenue is not there from the state rebate yet. So we've tried to calculate as best we can that cost. The interesting figure then, based on those 5 projects I showed you, our consultants, and I can't tell you how they do it, but they have a recognized and approved process. They're estimating that those 5 projects will generate $20 million, $21.5 million over 20 years. Now, I think that's pretty ambitious because that includes the revenue from that second hotel that we probably won't have any guarantee in a developer's agreement that's going to occur, and maybe ambitious in terms of how quickly all the retail space will be filled and start generating revenue. If that is true, their estimate, the citizens would only have to we'd only have to raise taxes to cover $392,000 for the net cost of the swimming pool. Now, I personally think that's a little ambitious. That's what we're going to apply for from the state. So we're probably going to apply for $21 million from the state. Now, whether they'll grant it all or they'll approve of our estimates, that's all yet to be determined. In fact, I want to tell you, back in 2014, if you were around, we had a developer from Kansas City who approached us about building the dinosaur park. Same concept at the time. The state had this available. We applied for it, and we did not score enough points to be awarded the contract. So we're not guaranteed we'll get approval from the state. It'll be very competitive, and if we do, we're not sure we'll get $21 million. I tried to come up with a more conservative number, and that may be still too ambitious, that we may end up with a net of $6 million. If we don't get any money, then the council will have to decide, do you want to go ahead and try to go for issuing bonds for $21 million, the whole net effect of the bond issue, the impact of the bond issue. I do have just below that, just so you know, their breakdown, the consultant's breakdown. You can go over the $20,527. Keep going down there, Brian. That's their calculation on the sales tax deposits. They think that adds up to $21,527. And I think there was a question that Keith helped me with. Even the Aquatic Center, I think people pay sales taxes on daily admissions and your passes. There's a state tax on it that goes back to the state. So even over 20 years, they're projecting even the Aquatic Center generates some money. It's about only $25,000 a year from us. But that's what their breakdown is. Now, this is a very complex application that has a lot of information, a lot of their projections and tables that we'll have to submit with our application. Now, I guess I want to say, I want you to understand very clearly that what I'm asking for today is just get over the first hump. It's called the pre-application. All the information that is in this document and in our application will probably be modified. It will be modified because perhaps we don't get enough money, as much money as we're projecting here from the state. When we get into negotiations with the developer, or their market studies prove they can't provide as much square footage, it may drop. The revenue may drop. A lot of things will happen. But the good part is we've noticed that in past pre-applications have more likely than not been modified. After you've kind of got over the hump, you're then they'll set aside money for you, and then you got to put together your final agreement. And you'll have many, many months to put that together. And we'll have to have more tighter projections to prove to them. We'll also have to have a developer's agreement to make sure all this that they pledge they're going to build here and we've calculated revenue from will actually be built. So we've got some tough negotiations yet to work with developers on finalizing our agreement here. We've worked long and hard on this, and I do want to thank, I think a special thank goes to Dwayne Pitcher, who's worked on it. Kelly has worked on it, Diekman. I want to thank Dan Culhane, and Brenda Dreyer has worked on this too, and Keith Abraham. So we've spent a lot of time on this. I can't guarantee you anything, but it's certainly worth to go to the next step. Get us over the hump. Let's hope we're in the running for it. But everybody has to understand the developer could walk away from this. It might not pencil out for them. The city might not be able to provide the incentives they want. The state might turn us down. A lot is yet to happen, but we've come this far. I think we cannot look millions of dollars and just walk away from it right now. We should give it the best shot possible. And we'll, I think if we're going to keep this moving, we're going to have a developer's agreement by early summer, and then finalize the agreement for the state to see if we'll get the final approval from them. So there's a lot more work to be done, but I think it's worth it that we move ahead with this project. So I didn't want to be redundant for you all, but I wanted the public to understand this most of all. There might be some misconceptions of what money we're getting, where we're getting it from, how it's coming in. It's a rebate that comes in over time. It's not guaranteed up front. So there's going to be a little bit of a risk for us to go up front on this, and then we'll mitigate mitigate our principal and interest payments with the revenue we get from the state if we are fortunate enough to be selected. So any questions you might have from us or the teams here? I didn't go over the pictures. You saw the elevations. You know all that, I think, on at least the plaza and the swimming pool. We do have some elevations on the development too, but that probably will change. Okay, We're talking about pedestrian overpass. You see that? We're talking about maybe splitting up a parking lot and putting it 200 spaces behind Wells Fargo rather than all 600 on its current location, on along Lincoln Way. All those yet have to be negotiated. There's extra cost by building 2 buildings and an overpass there, which may or it may not happen. It may change as we negotiate the final concept here with the developers. Any questions you might have or comments? The actual action I'm looking for is I want you to authorize us, if you'd like, to submit this pre-application. But also as part of the application process, we need direction, motion to begin the process of establishing the urban renewal area. And we're going to have a coterminus with the urban renewal area will be the reinvestment district boundaries too. And that will be on, I think that's attachment 1 in your packet. You'll see that. Any questions?
Steve, I have a couple of things I'd like you to highlight very clearly for the audience, because I asked you these already. First of all, by filing this pre-application, we are not committing ourselves to anything. Is that correct?
That's right. My staff everybody can chime in if I'm wrong, but I've been told that we're not committed to anything right now. We can still walk away from the project. They are reserving money for us, may reserve a certain amount of money for us, but we have to enter into a final agreement with them before it's finalized, and we haven't promised anything to anyone. Anybody else have a different opinion on staff? I think that's what I've been told. Dwayne or Kelly?
No, we haven't even fulfilled all the requirements, like having an urban renewal area, so it couldn't be final even if we wanted it to be.
Okay, and I had another question, but I don't remember what it was. I think that's the most important thing, that that the citizens realize that you can't win if you don't play. And if we don't put this forward, we could lose millions of dollars from the state that could help fund a project that would otherwise possibly be paid for with the taxpayers' money. And that we have not got a final agreement with the developers. We have not committed to any sort of TIF financing or anything else at this stage, but we have to get the application in.
Yeah, the way I understand it, we want to be invited to the game, but we haven't showed up to play yet. We just want to be invited first, and then we'll decide if we want to play the game.
Steve, could you clarify the amount that we're asking Dan to fundraise? Did you say it's $8 million?
That's correct.
And could you remind us, when we worked with the fundraising portion for the Healthy Life Center, wasn't our goal there $6 million?
No, it was a lot more, actually. We raised a lot more. It was a much bigger project. I believe it was a $50-something million project, and we were looking for 29 million. There was just a lot. There was a lot more involved there.
But in terms of what Mayor Campbell and the group, I thought it was $6 million.
That was the sort of the charitable type donation rather than institutional donations.
So,
I don't have it before me, but no, I think it was substantially more. But I shouldn't say I don't have it before me.
Well, but my point though is that in the midst of looking at these other components with the state, that's still a substantial lift, and to be able to fundraise anywhere close to $8 million, that's a lot of people being very generous in our community. So I don't want to overlook that component. We appreciate Dan.
I think Dan's looking for the bigger donors. We're not going after the smaller ones right now, because we have to have this in place. This is not something we're asking for donations over 20 years. We're going to need the money up front from a few big donors is what we need right now. And Dan's got some calls out to people. So I'm sure he'll be successful.
Still very, very generous for people wanting to come up with that kind of money. That's very, very big. Thank you.
Yeah, so remember the pool has all the elements people wanted before. there are a lot of negatives expressed to us. One where they wanted to see the project in a downtown area. So this is as close as we can get. It's going to be a little bit more expensive because we have to buy this land versus the university land, but it's in the downtown area, which is going to be the gist of our claim to the state. With all the development you see coming on, we're going to draw a lot of people downtown with the plaza and the pool and some of the other areas, the hotel and the retail. That's what's going to make this a unique, powerful application, we hope.
Other questions for Steve? All right, we'll open up public input before we consider any motions tonight. Brian, is there anybody interested in addressing council on the pre-application and the staff and the council action form report?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close public input. Council, any further discussion before we entertain motions?
Mr. Mayor, if I could for a second, I just want to clarify one thing for everyone. As Steve said, we haven't completed the application yet. So those estimates on revenue and some of those figures, they're subject to change tomorrow as we go through and validate some of the tables and everything. I think the order of magnitude is absolutely right. It's projected over $20 million in revenue. But as we get through this tomorrow, we'll have to make sure those numbers are correct. So we'll update the application as we go through it.
Yeah, it could change too. So you got to give us the authorization to make that change.
Steve, just as a point of clarification, you're talking about the sales tax generated. Can you talk about that's new sales tax, not existing sales tax?
Yep. But once you create the district, it gets complex. If 5 years from now there's a new hotel that we can go in the state and ask to amend it to capture that new revenue from a new hotel. They won't increase their allotment to you. Let's say they gave us $15 million, but it'll certainly help us pay off that faster. We will pay it off faster, help us pay off the debt faster, if you will. The state likes it because then that'll release, that will start collecting their sales tax quicker too, so they like it. So yeah, but right now it's on only the new sales tax from the new projects, those 5 projects we're talking about.
And also, the point being is, and you mentioned it before, just to restate, even though you're applying for $21.9 million, the state may say, we're going to award you $15 million or $12 million, but that is the Iowa Economic Development Authority's prerogative. So the community understands that if it comes back and it's less, they're the ones that are awarding that amount of money. So
that's correct.
Okay, I entertain motion authorizing city staff to submit a pre-application to the Iowa Economic Development Authority for the Reinvestment District Program.
Move approval.
Clary and Garten, thank you. Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. And I entertain a motion directing staff to begin the required process of establishing an urban renewal area coterminous with the reinvestment district boundary.
So moved.
Etcher?
Second.
Corriere, thank you. Discussion? Those in favor of the motions, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Dwayne and Keith. All right, moving on to item 33, Urban Revitalization Area Annual Report. Kelly?
Yeah, good evening, Council. Tonight, you're taking the step to determine the projects that submitted, and we had 5 of those submit, are indeed consistent with the adopted criteria to receive property tax abatement. And again, the abatement's on the increment of value that was increased by the improvements they made on their property. We're recommending approval of all 5. They're in 3 separate urban revitalization areas. As I sent out an email this afternoon, we did confirm that the Spring Hill Suites site does meet the criteria related to flooding that we needed more documentation for, as we noted on Friday. But at this point in time, we believe you could award it to all 5 as requested.
Questions for Kelly? All right, we'll open up public comment on this item. Brian, is there anybody who desires to address council on this particular item?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Council will entertain a motion on resolution approving requests for tax exemptions for 415 Stanton, Unit 211, 415 Stanton, Unit 316, 138 Gray Avenue, 311 Ash Avenue, and 1810 Southeast 16th Street.
Move alternative 1.
Garten and Corey, thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item 34, hearing on city access control system. Council, do you have any questions for Corey? I see that he's available to answer anything. Or Corey, do you have anything you wish to add to supplement your report?
Not at this time. As you can see, we're just asking for a report of bids at this time.
Okay. Any questions for Corey? Hearing none, I declare the public hearing on the city access control system to be open. Ryan, is anybody that desires to address council on this?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
All right, we'll declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting report of bids only.
So moved.
Betcher.
Second.
Garten, thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you, Corey. Moving on to item number 35, hearing on water treatment plan Lime Pond Underdrain Improvement Project. Any questions for Mr. Dunn? Seeing none, declare the public hearing on the water treatment plant Lime Pond Underdrain Improvement Project to be open. Anyone who wants to address council on this item?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Thank you. We'll close public hearing. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plans, specifications, and awarding the contract to RW Excavating Solutions LC of Prairie City, Iowa, in the amount of $86,635.56.
So moved. Second.
Garten moved. Betcher second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Junk,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 36, hearing on proposed 2020-2021 annual action plan projects for community development block grant, CDBG, home, and CV-CARES programs. Good evening, Ms. Vanessa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is our actual 2021 annual action plan that we started last March that was to be submitted to HUD last May. And of course, due to the pandemic, we put the submittal of this action plan on hold. And we're just now getting around to getting it submitted, thankfully, before the end of the program year. And we've had a lot of changes since we started the plan back in last March. We've had to add some activities that we received funding under the COVID-19 programs, the round 1 funding, and just recently today we signed the contract to receive our round 3 funding for this program. We've had to amend our 2019 action plan 3 times already just to accommodate these funds. And so that's what you have before you. And I just kind of want to go over some of the changes that we made since we talked about the plan last March. We did add an activity for the disposition of the 6th Street properties. We had needed that the sale of that property to help support the infrastructure project at the Baker subdivision. So we set aside funds for the appraisal, any abstracting, and the other things that we need to do to get that property sold. So that's why you see a budget now for that. And of course, we also added the low-income tax assistance money that we kind of debated whether or not we needed to put this in this year's budget or next year's budget. But in order to make our application strong with Prairie Fire, who the council agreed that we would proceed with this, we initially, when we set out for the RFP, we set a budget of $400,000 of our home funds because we're just not sure what developers would ask for. So that was our initial ceiling. And as we looked at the proposal from Prairie Fire, they initially came up with $250,000, excuse me. And just recently, as they start looking at the construction based on some of the changes that we made with their conceptual design, and that this be a Davis-Bacon project, they have requested if we could increase the home funds to $350,000. So that's why you see that additional amount in this budget compared to the $250 that was initially talked about with them. And we felt, again, we don't want to be the ones that doesn't cause the application to go through with IFA. So that's why we increased that to cover what that gap might be needed for the application to be submitted next week. And so those were kind of the major changes that we added to the budget, in addition to, again, round 1 of CARES Fund and round 3 of CARES Fund that also was added to this budget. And so that's kind of the major changes that was adjusted in this budget.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Vanessa? Hearing none, I'll declare the public hearing on the proposed 2020-2021 annual action plan for projects for CDBG, home, and CB CARES programs to be open. Brian, is there anybody that's interested in addressing council?
Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you. Declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving the annual action plan projects and directing staff to submit the plan for approval by HUD no later than February 28th, 2021.
So moved.
Hatcher, thank you.
Second.
Corriere, thank you. Roll call, please.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you all. Just so you know, next month we'll be talking about the 21-22 action plan that's going to be due here in a few months. So just get prepared. We're still catching up, but thank you for your support.
Thank you, Vanessa, for your efforts. All right, moving on to item number 37, hearing on zoning text amendment to the Downtown Service Center zoning district to reduce the number of vehicle parking spaces required for apartment use. Any questions for staff on this particular item tonight? Any comments, Kelly, before we open the public hearing?
Nope, just that we will come back later on the other 2 issues that council referred to us about overnight parking on public property and remote parking in the general area. So those are to come in the future.
Okay. All right, declare a public hearing on zoning text amendment to the Downtown Service Center zoning district to be open. Brian, is there anybody who wants to address council on this item?
Mayor, I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
All right, thank you. Declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance.
So moved.
Brown, thank you.
Second.
Second by Garten, thank you. Roll call.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere.
Okay, moving on to item 38, hearing and rezoning of 2801 and 2803 West Street from residential high density to neighborhood commercial with University West impact overlay. Kelly?
Yeah, Justin Moore is here to present this item.
All right, Justin, take it away.
Okay, thank you. The request before you, the owner has made application to us for the property to rezone this, as you said, from the high density residential high density designation to neighborhood commercial in the West University impact overlay. The owner just briefly approached staff a while back, inquiring about adding one additional residential unit into the small apartment building on the lot. The lot currently contains the small apartment building and an existing small commercial building, both on the same lot. Under the RH standards, having two buildings with different uses on the same lot makes both uses non-conforming. So even though it's a designated residential zone, the addition of a residential unit is not permitted under our non-conforming use standards in Article 3. So as the owner talked with staff a bit more, the owner decided to go ahead and submit this application for rezoning to neighborhood commercial. As we explained in the report, the LUPP has no required underlying designation for neighborhood commercial, as neighborhood commercial is designed for situations just like this. Also, the existing properties on the south side of West Street are all already designated NC. And with the existence of a commercial building and a residential building together on this property, and the fact that neighborhood commercial does support both standalone uses to exist on the same lot, staff feels that the proposed neighborhood commercial zoning actually better fits the property as it currently is. So the proposed addition of one unit does not require a site development plan, as it does not increase parking requirements or stormwater or anything of that sort. So if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them now, but I think pretty straightforward.
Thank you. Questions for Justin?
So this is the barber shop.
Correct.
Just, I mean, if you just look at the map, you don't really have a sense of what it is. It's just a purple thing. And so as a result of this change of zoning, could you just flesh out a little more what could be done differently with this property? It's a very key property. What would be different?
So with a neighborhood commercial zoning designation, in theory, in the future, the property could just have a standalone commercial use on it as well, as opposed to now with both the residential and a commercial use. So that is possible, and we did list there in the report the different types of commercial uses that could be permitted under a neighborhood commercial zoning designation. The one of the things, though, that no matter what will always apply in the future is if there is any increase to the size of an existing building or any increase in impervious area over 150 square feet, that will trigger a minor site development plan review, and then the property would need to come into compliance with site development standards under the zoning ordinance. So, but the neighborhood commercial designation does open up more possibilities for commercial use on the site, as well as permitting residential use to coexist with it.
So we're doing this to allow one extra residential unit, but it could open the door to a number of other different uses on this property long term.
Potentially, yes, under the proposed zoning. The addition of one residential unit, as I said, the way the bedroom configuration is being proposed by the owner, it did not require any more parking. and that was key in the owner being able to maintain the site as is without having to provide additional parking, such as additional paving or striping or anything like that.
And the access off West Street?
The property is accessed primarily off Highland from the east, and also with a shared access to the north. There's no overhead right now, so it's a little difficult to explain. But the primary front of the both buildings, the small barber shop and the apartment building, front on West Street with the vehicular access off of Highland.
Okay, thank you.
I put up the aerial for you if you were interested.
That's helpful for giving people a chance to see what it says. That's what I did on mine.
Yeah, I think, Tim, that the site's so non-conforming, even though the two uses become more legitimate with the change, you really can't intensify the property in any significant way. It just gives a little more freedom to reuse the buildings as they are. Obviously, they could wipe the site clean and start from scratch. It's a small site. There wouldn't be a whole lot of ability to develop it as one lot, though, because of setbacks and parking and other considerations. So if we did nothing, that house would stay essentially in its same configuration of bedrooms and apartments, and the commercial use, that building would stay. It would have very limited options for re-tenanting for any other kind of trade or personal service use. By rezoning it, there's a little more freedom to switch between trade uses and offices. Probably, you couldn't add a bar. You couldn't add something that requires a lot more parking because they don't have parking on the site.
Other questions? Hearing none, declare the public hearing on rezoning of 2801 and 2803 West Street from residential high density to neighborhood commercial with University West impact overlay to be open. Ryan, is there anybody that wants to address council on this item tonight?
Mayor, I don't see any raised.
Thank you. Declare the public hearing to be closed and entertain a motion on first passage of the ordinance.
So moved.
Martin?
Second.
Betcher? Beatty Hansen, thank you. Roll call.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere, Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item 39, hearing on maximum levy. Dwayne and Nancy.
Yeah, this was the maximum levy that we set at the last meeting. This was a new process that started a year ago and includes publishing that in addition to the traditional method. Susan posted on several different social media sites and gets it out in different areas. It shows what would happen if we kept the levy rate the same, kept the property tax ask the same. Obviously the levy rate would go down. It did go down even with the amount we included, but anytime the increased taxes on all the levies, excluding the debt service levy, greater than 2%, requires passing this max levy to proceed with the budget as it's planned. And that's the action you need to take tonight to move forward to approve the budget on the 9th of March, I believe.
Questions for Nancy and or Dwayne? Hearing none, I declare the public hearing on the maximum levy amount to be open. Ryan, is there anybody that wants to address council on this item?
Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you. Declare the public hearing on maximum levy to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving the maximum levy amount to $22,401,045.
Move the resolution.
Amber, thank you.
Second.
Gloria, thank you. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on resolution setting March 9th, 2021 as date of final public hearing on adjusted budget for FY 2020-2021.
So moved.
Gloria, thank you.
Second.
Second by Bronwyn, thank you. Roll call.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on resolution setting March 9th, 2021 as date of final public hearing and adoption of budget for FY 2021-22.
So moved.
Second.
Garten and Beatty Hansen, thank you. Roll call.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Thank you. Dwayne, Nancy, thank you. Job well done, and we'll see you on March 9th for the final hearings.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 40, ordinances. An ordinance on secondhand dealers to obtain permit to conduct business within the city of Ames. Mark?
Yeah, this is just to correct an oversight in the ordinance. 5 years ago, the council adopted an ordinance that put some requirements on secondhand dealers, similar to really the same as requirements on pawnbrokers to keep track of items that came in, serial numbers, and that sort of thing. It helps the police identify stolen merchandise. However, we discovered recently, because of some questions from a potential applicant, that there was an oversight in the drafting, and the section of the ordinance that requires a permit from the city clerk did not say that secondhand dealers had to get a permit. So, and the permit is how we enforce the ordinance. So anyway, this is just a very simple ordinance to correct that oversight.
Questions from Mark? Can open up public comment on this item, and that's the first passage of an ordinance. Brian, is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular item tonight?
Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
All right, we'll close public comment. Entertain a motion on first passage of ordinance requiring secondhand dealers to obtain a permit to conduct business within the city of Ames.
So moved.
Second.
And Beatty Hansen, thank you. Roll call.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Beatty Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Garten,
Aye.
Junk.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Next item is first passage of ordinance setting the speed limit for the new South 5th Street extension. Any questions for Mr. Joyner on this one?
This one where we want, where it's helpful to have second and third readings done too. Because it's a speed limit. I mean, is there any urgency to change or adopt that?
If council wishes to suspend the rules or waive, suspend the rules and have second and third reading, we can do that tonight.
I just feel like we did that with another speed limit last time. Maybe nobody else remembers that. Never mind.
All right. Well, we still can do it, Brown. All right. Well, and we'll open up public comment on the ordinance setting speed limit for the new South 5th Street extension.
Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Thank you. We'll close public input. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance setting the speed limit for the new South 5th Street extension.
I'll move.
Rachel?
Second.
And Gloria, thank you. Roll call.
Martin.
Aye.
Judy Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere.
Aye.
Does council have an interest in waiving or suspending the rules for and having the second and third passage this evening on this item?
Let's get it done.
Is there a motion? Got a motion?
Rules. Second.
All right, I'm sorry. Who made the motion? Amber, and second by Brown. Thank you. Roll call on the motion to waive the rules.
Judy Hansen,
Aye.
Betcher,
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin.
Nay, and I feel really bad about it.
Okay, motion carried. Entertain a motion on second passage of ordinance setting the speed limit for the new South 5th Street extension.
We haven't had any dissenting votes tonight, David.
Is there a motion?
Move on second.
Thank you, Gloria. And Brown. All right, roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Judy Hansen,
Aye. He wanted
Okay.
a little Audubon down there, I think, is what he wanted. You go as fast as you want.
And entertain a motion on third passage of ordinance and adoption setting the speed limit for the new South 5th Street extension.
Move on third.
Second.
I'm sorry, who got first? Brown, and second was Gloria. All right, roll call.
No, I didn't second. Amber
I'm
did.
sorry, Amber did. All right. Roll call.
Betcher,
Aye.
Barton,
Aye.
Junk,
Aye.
Corriere,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Judy Hansen.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to disposition of communications to council. First of all, we have a memo from Jeff Huff regarding liquor license update. Steve, this is just under advisement, is that correct?
Yep, no action needed.
Thank you. Second one is a memo from Brian on Public Art Commission's research into options for painting or wrapping electrical transformers in a downtown area.
Brian's gonna go do it unless you tell him otherwise.
Any direction to the contrary? Otherwise, we're going to have them move forward as set forth in the memo.
Brian looks ready to do it.
Get his paintbrush ready.
All right. And then there was one other one that we didn't get on here. David, do you want to mention that one you brought to our attention this afternoon?
Yes, this was an email from Scott Costeris about, well, let me just read the sentence. This is really simple. Now that the U.S. Board of Geographic Names has approved the name change of Squaw Creek to Ioway Creek, I believe that it is only prudent to remove the word squaw from Squaw Creek Drive and Squaw Creek Gardens in Ames as well. Sounds like a good idea to me, so I would move to ask staff for a memo on fixing street names, park names, the community garden names, and what it would take also to update the relevant maps and signs that the city provides or controls.
Second.
Second.
Second by Besher. Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Move on to council comments. Thank you. Amber.
Nothing for me.
Rachel?
We all got an email from Chad Watkins on Thursday Did that is that one that should have made the council packet as well? It was about reimbursement for vending licenses from last year. Is that right?
Thank you for bringing that up. It should have made it to the packet. You're right. It did not. I think I failed to forward it on to Diane to include it.
Did I just move for a memo from staff on that? Or no? Sorry, Steve.
I think it's so small. I think it's
okay.
Like $250. I don't know if you want to give me direction or let me handle this administratively to reimburse them.
If you can, that's just fine. Yeah.
I don't know if I can. That's why.
Oh.
Yeah, there are five vending licenses that are impacted. It's $50 a year for a license. 3 of the licenses are held by Chad, and 2 are held by 2 other individuals. So we can put something on the council agenda for the next meeting, or we can
just give the motion just to do it. Or
to empower staff to deal with reimbursements on those vendor licenses mentioned.
Second.
All right, moved by Brown and second by Rachel. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried. Thanks, Brown. Anything else that I happen to miss under disposition? Okay, Amber, you had nothing. Rachel?
Nothing tonight.
David?
Yes, I have a couple of items. The first has to do with the payroll shift on the city assessor. I was going to make a motion about that. Is that okay tonight? Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks. So Brian sent us a proposed memorandum of understanding. I would move to put that on a city council agenda.
Second?
Second.
Second by Gloria. Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carried.
Okay, and my second item is along the lines of what else can we be doing for sustainability? I found myself not able to remember how this all turned out. We had a motion in 2019, July 23rd of 2019, to have staff bring back additional information to council on the Alliant model for net metering with an eye towards improving the incentives that Ames offers for solar customers. And I just don't remember that actually coming back to us.
Didn't Don give you a memo on that a long time ago?
I couldn't find it.
I thought he did.
That's off our list, so I thought we completed that. I thought
it's off the list.
Well,
he might not have given us a memo. He might have actually said something about it when he was reporting to us about something else orally in one of the meetings, because I have a vague recollection of him doing that.
But I will follow up and get you another report on that.
That would be great. Thank you. Because certainly council didn't take any action and we didn't see any incentives change. No. And so that's the step that I'd like to see us take up.
I was trying to find out what Alliance doing with net metering, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it was the Alliant model is what we called it.
I think he found out it wasn't as good as you thought it was, and be even worse. And the person who brought it up, he had talked to, and they realized that. But I'll bring it all back to you.
Okay, and then we'll probably need to follow up on it, but that's fine. If you do that, would you like a motion for that, Steve?
Please, get on the record.
I would move to ask Steve to refresh my memory on the response to the July 23rd, 2019 motion regarding net metering.
For a second?
Second.
All right, Rachel seconded. Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Carried.
Thanks. That's all.
Tim?
Nothing tonight. Good meeting.
Rowan?
Well, we just referenced it, but I was, really glad to see that creek name is now the Iowa Creek. Happy to see that go through the board of geographic names. So that's all for me tonight.
you. Gloria?
I'm sorry to see that Chief Higgins has dropped off our list. I wanted to thank the Ames Fire Department for saving my office building on campus. I have an office in Ross Hall at Iowa State, and the fire department did an excellent job putting out what could have been a much worse fire. So thank you to all those firefighters. The other thing I'm interested in following up on is the suggested change to our consent agenda policies and when we remove things from consent. And I'm not really sure what the next step for that is, whether we put that, I move to put that on an agenda for discussion. Is that, so I would move that we put on a future agenda a discussion of the process for pulling items from consent.
Can we put that on the consent agenda?
No.
No?
Rachel seconded, thank you. Discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Was it Brown and David said nay? Is that right? And Amber verified. Amber and Rachel, you're aye. I just want to make sure so Amy can actually record it. Was it 4-2 or 3-3? All right, Amber and Rachel, Tim and Gloria. Motion carried 4-2.
I think we're all getting a little punchy, so I'll just end there.
Okay, thank you. Nicole?
Nothing from me.
Thank you. I have nothing tonight either, so entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the evening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.